Well, I'm sure, like me, you've heard, read many times that the mark of a good photograph is one that tells a story. Well, I want to suggest something a little bit different and say that the mark of a good photograph is one that communicates. So what do I mean by communicate? Well, I think every time we look at an image, at a photograph, we respond to it as the viewer, and the power of that response is a function of how well that image is communicating to us. As human beings, we are hardwired to visual cues and to respond to visual stimuli. So when we look at photographs, it's no surprise in the saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words, because in a very, very short space of time, we can sense a lot from what we see in an image. And I think for me, it comes into three phases. I think the first phase when we look at an image is that we have an immediate emotional response. How powerful that is depends on how well the image is communicating to us. Then that emotional response causes us to think, maybe to step back and think about what's going on in the image. And from there, we'll often create the narrative. So we end up in the place where a good image tells a story. But I think it starts further back than that, and it starts with an emotional response. To illustrate this, what I'm going to do shortly is pull up a photograph which I took a number of years ago, and we'll let you see that, and we'll pick up the story back at the computer, where I'll also tell you something of the background to the image. Okay, here we are at the computer, and a mug of coffee in hand. It always helps. So what we're going to do then is have a look at this photograph, really from the archives. It's one that I took back in, I think 2005, it might have been 2008. I'll double check that. Certainly a number of years ago now, and it was on a filming trip to DR Congo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this image up on screen, full screen, and give you about 10 seconds with it. And what I want you to do in those 10 seconds is just to consider what's your emotional response to this image. So are you ready? Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So there you are, 10 seconds. What did you feel when you saw that image? What was your emotional reaction? I have to say that it's one that even now, for me, all these years later, I still find difficult to look at. Obviously, it's a situation in which I was there. I took this photograph, and there are moments where, particularly in things like these, where it's a kind of a candid shot, you're in a foreign country, you're there to do a particular job, you're aware that you are kind of potentially intruding into other people's lives. So there is, I think for me, there is that kind of connection that happens. But I want you to just consider now, what did you feel? I mean, obviously you can't tell me, other than in the comments. Go on, don't be afraid. Pop into the comments what your first feeling was, your first reaction was to looking at that image. And from there, what do you think? What does this image actually make you think might be going on? And out of that, what's the story that it's telling you? Well, this was one of these shots that it was not planned. It was just a situation that I happened to see in the moment. We were doing some filming in and around a school, a high school in Kinshasa, capital of DR Congo, and it happened to be break time, and all the kids had come out. They were spilling around the playground. We were trying to set up the video team in a corner to get some work done there. So I just wandered around to see what I could see, to grab some still shots, and I was just immediately struck by this scene in front of me. These two girls sitting on a big stone block, back to back, obviously. And it's just one of those ones that you just see and you have to take very quickly. So technically, for those of you who are interested in this, I set up the camera on, for where we were. I wanted to make sure that as you're taking these kind of shots, you've got a good chance of getting a good exposure pretty much on the nail all the time. So I set my exposure for the kind of brighter areas, knowing that if I had to go into shade, I could easily make a quick adjustment. But these things just present themselves, and you've got to be ready. You've got to have your kit ready. So I was shooting on a Nikon D70. On that occasion, I had the ISO set to 500. Some people might go, "Ooh, that seems a bit high." Really, no. I'm not fussed about what people nowadays call noise. I grew up with grain because I grew up with film. Don't let that stress you out. You sometimes need a good ISO to get the right balance of the other elements of the exposure. So I set to ISO 500. I was shooting on a 300mm lens, so there's a fair bit of distance involved in this shot. Looking at the data on the image, it was 1/640th of a second at f9. So f9 I had chosen to give myself a reasonable depth of field for any shots that presented themselves, and 1/640th of a second ought to give me, on a focal length of 300 mil, ought to pretty much eliminate any handheld camera shake. So this just presented itself. Quickly up with the camera, quickly frame, take the shot. And in that moment, because they were in good light, I didn't even give exposure a thought. And the image that you see is pretty much what came straight out of camera. It wasn't until afterwards that I was told a story that suddenly made this make sense. But I looked at it and I thought, the scene in the moment was just sad, I think. That's how I would express it. Knowing the backstory that I do, and I'm about to share with you now, that's even more exaggerated. But in DR Congo, I was told this later after I'd taken this photograph, probably later in the evening. In DR Congo, albinos are kind of socially outcast. They are really not accepted into society, and what we've got here in this photograph is an albino girl and another girl from the school, and other people sharing a seat but sitting back to back. So the girl on the right is sitting with her back to the albino girl, who's engrossed in whatever it is she's doing. She's got something in her hands there. And the girl on the right is just disengaged, isn't she? I mean, you look at that and you think it's just a picture of rejection. And when I look at this now, that's my emotional response, is real sadness that people can reject other people in such a way. And the curious thing now about it, knowing that albinos are kind of socially outcast in Congo, is why did that girl choose to sit there beside her? Was she making a point to friends in the school that I'm turning my back on this girl? Was she in some way maybe trying to reach out to her but didn't want to be seen to be doing so and sat back to back? It's hard to know exactly what's going on, but hopefully you get my point about how images communicate, how we start with an emotional response. And I hope you got that. I really hope you got a clear emotional response that you were able to recognise. And as I said, please do pop those into the comments down below. And from there, you can begin to analyse this and think about the image and think, what's it potentially saying to me? And then from there, you kind of build your own narrative. Now, you may well have built your own narrative fairly quickly about this. I hadn't really, because on these filming trips it's a busy day and you're going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and you're not really taking time to process. And oftentimes you don't process the images till you've got them back and you're looking at them on screen and making sense out of them. So this one, for me, knowing the backstory of how albinos are really socially outcast in Congo, made sense of the image to an extent, but I'm still left with a puzzling narrative. Why did that other girl choose to sit beside her when the albino girl is socially outcast? What was she making a point of rejection? Was she reaching out but didn't want to be seen to be doing so? Who knows? And that's the dilemma we're left with in looking at this image. But I hope this image speaks to you. I hope you do have a reaction to it, and maybe it does make you think about, how do we behave in our relationships with other people? Do we reject people on spurious grounds, on grounds of no real justification at all? It's food for thought, isn't it? Food for thought out of one image. So if you've enjoyed this, if this has been meaningful for you, please do give me a thumbs up. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, then turn on notifications and you'll be told every time I upload new content. So as ever, thanks for popping by, and until the next time, cheerio.